Hello, boys and girls. This is Rainbow John out here again with another Pineapple Express. Well, time has gone by, and the dear old pineapple, regretfully, didn't get out in the sunshine, and it got a little aged. But one of the beauties about pineapple, I know I do have a fridge, but I'm sure they keep and dry probably quite naturally in the country, and therefore, once again, I'm going to take my hat off to the great Creator for not giving, for not only giving us the Blessed Sacrament, which I'm not actually got on my person at this moment. We'll deal with that later, but pineapples. And I think this was actually an Ecuadorian pineapple, and this was delivered to my door. Well, not quite. I went down to the local market and got it for $5, or a little less than $5. Now, that was a big pineapple before it began to shrink with the fact that it was in a fridge. But I'm going to check it out. Mm, thank you, great Creator. Man, thank you. It's middle of the afternoon, and a few things I wanted to talk about. Um, I've been writing a fair bit on my Facebook thing, and I understand that goes, directly through the Google form and the CIA and all the rest of them. But as you know, I've been attempting to, I think the correct word is turn most of these people. But there's an issue we have to deal with, and that is the real dirty tricks and blue meanness, and how the bully force um, begins to reckon with its own conscience. I was taught as a young man, really, ultimately, the only thing you can really do is stand up to bullies. And that doesn't mean to say you have to go and attack them. In fact, preferably they stay the hell away from you if that's their intent. And certainly you have a responsibility, I think, as men to stand up when you see bullying going on. And I think this involves also bullying by government. And there's been a great deal of bullying by government since I blew the whistle on the whole monetary thing in 1972, which then became apparent and noticeable on the common screen by 74 and has gone exponential ever since, and has put everybody into being not merely job jockeys and wage slaves, but people now threatened by extinction by a fascist dictatorship that parades itself as being a government in Canada. And well, in fact, I think it's not even calling itself the government of Canada now, it's calling itself the Harper government. Well, that in itself is a betrayal of trust in public office and treasonous. The further issue about money, there's a golden opportunity here for the Crown to redeem itself as a legitimate entity carrying as a legitimate entity carrying along the traditions and values that have heretofore served the common people, and the majesty of the royal ideals that are supposedly enshrined but must necessarily be demonstrated. And clearly the evidence has been that the Crown has lost its head and has become rather counterproductive in its behavior, largely by supporting the warmongers after the Second World War, when money, not really properly understood by the vast majority of people, um, was removed from the ideal that was adopted by the Canadian government in law, and still is, has recently been amply demonstrated by Mr. Abrams. I brought it to the attention of the Governor General that things were getting way the heck out of line as a result of, I guess, signals I received probably from the Admiral, but certainly through my father. And to the best of my knowledge, it was way out of my line, but I checked it out with my neighbor, Mr. McLeod, next door, and even the local RCMP. And they said, well, what do you think it is? And I said, well, I think it's a serious issue of national security, and unless Mr. Trudeau is confronted by the other ministers, it's evident then that they're all in bed together and are going to let this pass. And by allowing it to pass, then everybody was put into debt. Well, here's an opportunity for the Crown, the Queen, to reassert the dignity of her office and the value of her office in the final analysis, to have a jubilee to celebrate her years of service. And she can do this directly, and jubilee uh, meant that after 49 years, all debts were extinguished. Now, if Her Majesty the Queen began to extinguish all debts in this way, removing any form of taxation on the people of Canada, and formally recognize that the people of Canada already have a functioning bank before Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Stanfield and who were the others? The Rail Coet was then a creditiste. Was it Tommy Douglas then? Stephen Lewis. Yeah, it was Stephen Lewis then, right, for the NDP. Anyway, none of them blew the whistle because, one way or another, they were all so out of touch with what money was about because it had been so befuddling, and they'd seen it come and they'd seen it go, and they didn't realize that only very few people in the know, the CD Howes and so on, really knew the way the game was properly played for their advantage, and they went about doing that. Anyway, blowing the whistle 40 years ago, it's almost 40 years, it was November of 1972, and here we are, 2012, and that was, yeah. I'm getting a little off the point though. What I was talking about was bullying, and I asked myself when they um, uh, disbanded the parachute regiment with obviously the indoctrination of the United States and their dirty tricks and blue meanness brigades, which were not uncommon during the war for Canadians as well, and I guess there was great adventure in cutting people's throats and so on. All this kind of ugliness, obviously comes out of, our distant past, and it's associated with domination, it's associated with territorial prerogatives, it's all being well described in even common literature, and I'm not a specialist. Most of my information is commonly understood and known, but it's just a matter of relating this to the situation we're in today, where the police forces are beginning to behave more like bullies without minds. And then I have to ask myself, well, where were they trained? Were they trained in the same places that our Canadian regiment were trained, or the specialists within it, so that the camaraderie of killing became, part of the game? How many you got now? I mean, that was a game in the Wild West, and that kind of madness is out there, and we have to find forgiveness that these people have been so led astray, partly because they've totally bullied and brazened their way over the small voice within them that is really telling them how to behave. And that's a great tragedy and a great sadness. And I do know that I have been encouraging uh, for a long time now, most of my life, anybody who appeared to be any kind of intelligent uh, activist or aware person, to begin to think in terms of not the problems we have, but the future we face. And how would a moneyless state work? I wrote something the other day, and again, I'm getting away from bullying, but they're all in the same bag, really. Um, Really, we could have had the leisure state back in 1972. We were prepared for the leisure state. We come through the 60s. We saw the advantages. All we had to do was not allow Johnson, uh, to well, bring on what was it? The I was going to say Korean War, but then we had the other ugly one, didn't we? Yeah, oh boy, it's been a long, long road of suffering. And then people say, well, some streams of mystical religionism or even book worship religionism talk about the birth pains uh, of the birth of of the Christ, of the Messiah. Well, I don't think we're going to have one Messiah this time. I think we're going to have probably hundreds and thousands of Messiahs this time. Whether they come from temples with Hare Krishna, or whether they come from men who've rediscovered their manhood through acknowledging that they've not really been listening to the small, quiet voice that has been trying to direct their affairs and have bullied it through because of their immediate needs, whether they were sexual or forced upon them by an oppressive state, or just whatever, we have to accept that we're coming out of a period of Kali Yuga. We're moving into an age of truth. And by acknowledging our Creator and the gifts we've been given, and turning to the small, quiet voice within, then I think we can all grow to be stronger and better people, more dedicated to each and everyone's well-being. Leave no one out. There's plenty to go around. And the cruel savages that have used money since 1972 to oppress the Canadian people, I think need to apologize on a grand scale. And if they're not ready to do that, well, I guess the consequences uh, will be with them. And I guess if you've got to take drugs to go to sleep at night, there's something wrong with your thinking.